Hello, Artful Journeys students. Can you hear me okay? I'm turning up my volume. All right, it's Artful Journeys with Mrs. Gerald for March 30th, 2020. We're going to learn about Antonio Gaudi today, and he was a Spanish architect born in around the middle of the 1800s, died in 1926, so he died almost 100 years ago. And we haven't studied any architects yet, so I think you're going to like this one. He's a little out of the box. But first I want to start with a Bible verse for today. And here's our Bible verse. I'm going to hold it up here. I think you can read it. No, I don't know if it's going to come through the right way. It's backwards to me. Is it backwards to you? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, it says, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. 1 John 1:5. And do you know that it's only 2 weeks until Easter? I can't believe that next Sunday is Palm Sunday. The Sunday after that is Easter. And I think you're going to like today's lesson because it ties into Easter as well. So just be remembering our verse for today, that God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. All right, are you ready? Okay. Let's see. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about Antonio Gaudi, and you probably have this page printed out. If not, take a look at it. I'm going to read a little bit about Antonio Gaudi to you. You can see a picture right up here. This is the main church of his that we're going to talk about. But first, Antonio Gaudi was a Spanish architect. So Spain is in Europe. It's on the other side of the world from where we are. It's a long ways away. And he lived a long time ago. He didn't have a computer or a telephone. So he didn't have all of the modern conveniences that we have today or that architects have today when they are designing buildings. And Antonio Gaudi was an architect, which means he designed buildings, and he mapped them out on paper and pencil, the old-fashioned way. However, he was different from, I guess, traditional architects in that he used flowing and curvy lines a lot more than rigid lines. He really pushed the boundaries, and you'll see that in some of the things we're going to look at. He used a lot of color in some of his things and some very curvy shapes, which is a little harder to do in a building. It's easier to do with a paintbrush and some markers, but when you're building a building, you've got to think of not just this direction and this direction and that direction, but you also have to think this way too. So 3D, a little bit different. So one of his most famous works is a cathedral in the town of Barcelona, Spain. It's called La Sagrada Familia. And he began that church in 1882. He was still working on it when he died in 1926. I haven't calculated how many years that is yet, so let's do it right now. 26, 36 plus 8 is 44. Is that right? He worked on it for 44 years, and it was not finished when he died. However, he had drawings and ideas written down so that people who lived after him could follow his ideas. However, I believe that the last blueprint that he drew was destroyed in 1938. So there are architects today currently working on it to finish it, and they don't know exactly what he had in mind for this church, but they're doing their best to follow the instructions they did have for the parts they had, and also to maintain his look and his style as they finish this church. So it's pretty interesting to me that it's now almost 100 years since he died, and definitely over 100 years since he started this church, and it's still being worked on today. How amazing is that? Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I want to screen share with you before I move to the next part of showing you how we're going to do today's lesson. So I'm going to find a little button that says share my screen. Here it is. I'm going to do that. I'm going to share that. Okay, so I've got some slides pulled up here you can see on your computer. This is a picture of the front of the Sagrada Familia Church. That's a very interesting look at all of this. Now, one of the things I want to remind you is when we're looking at art, we just want to take some time and look at the details. And I look at all these windows down here where you see my arrow down here, these arrows. We'll look at these, what these windows look like from the inside in another picture. Look at these big, I wouldn't call them columns. They actually have a name in architecture. There are more traditional styles of these, but these are actually called flying buttresses because they support the building. The building is so big, and when they created these cathedrals hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they wanted to give them a little extra support because that's a lot of stonework, and they didn't want things sagging and falling over. So they put these supports pushing up against the building on the sides, and it just gave it the little extra support it needed. Okay, let's see if I can move to the next slide. This is another one of Antonio Gaudi's buildings. Have you ever seen a building like that? So curvy, very unique for its time. You might think that maybe there are buildings today like that, and there could be, but back in his day, this was really new. This was something too. Again, very new for the time back then. Look at all these individual stones that went into that. Here's another building, and on the front here, it's hard to see in this photo, these are mosaics, and here too. So mosaics are little tiny bits of glass or pottery, I suppose, set into a type of cement-like material to make a design. Look at these balconies, how curvy they are. And the windows that open up right here, and yet with pillars, and then all these designs. Would you ever think to do that if you were an architect? This is something else. Look at these beautiful curvy shapes and lots of detail. There's patterns and lines here. He could have made this very straight and smooth, but he wanted texture and pattern. This was another one of his cathedrals, actually a palace. You can see that looks a little more traditional, doesn't it? As I'm moving my cursor around there. Okay, and another picture. You can see the cranes up at the top. They're still working on this structure. Okay, I think I've got one more. There you go. There's a picture of it lit up from night. Now we were looking at it. I'm not sure if we were looking at it from this side or the other side, but you can see over on the left of the building, that's the more traditional look. And if you look closely, you can see that the windows on the lower left are lit up from the inside. You can see some blues and some greens of the stained glass windows. Okay, I'm going to close this out. I'm going to show you something else. All right, sorry about that. Here we go. This is a flyer or a handout that I've attached for our lesson today. You might have it printed out in front of you. You might not. It's got a lot of color on it. So I told your parents that if they didn't want to print out that much color, it was okay not to. But take a look here. I want to show you something. And I'm hoping that my little arrow, my cursor is showing on here. Here on the right, in the middle, the far right, is a picture of La Sagrada Familia. And it's in Barcelona, Spain. Up above, though, is another famous cathedral called Notre Dame. It's in the country of France, in the city of Paris, a very, very old cathedral, still in use today. Well, it was until about a year ago when it suffered a great fire. It was very tragic, and your parents probably remember it. It was in the news last year, and a large portion of this church burned. And so there will be efforts to restore this church. This church also has some beautiful stained glass. And if you look on the lower left of this flyer over here, this is a picture from inside Notre Dame Cathedral, and you can see all these beautiful designs and colors in the glass work there. On the lower part here of the flyer, these 3 panels, these are stained glass windows from my church in Bothell, actually, from Cedar Park Church in Bothell. And our pastor really wanted to have a stained glass window in our chapel. And I'm so glad that he did. Look at all that color. And so let's talk about stained glass art, because that's really what we're going to focus on in our lesson today. We're going to take our inspiration from Antonio Gaudi. And I thought it was so appropriate to do that at this time of year with church, Easter being in just 2 weeks. And none of us this year will be attending church in a church. Maybe you usually do, and maybe your church has a stained glass window in it, but I won't get to see my church's stained glass windows this year. So I think it's so appropriate that we're going to be making our own, and you can have some stained glass art in your house for Easter this year. Okay, so in this flyer still, oh, here in the middle, sorry, sometimes I get off track a little bit. Okay, in the middle here, stained glass is the art of joining cut pieces of colored glass with melted metal, it's called lead, in a design. The metal cools quickly, very quickly, like within a couple of moments, and then it holds the pieces of glass together permanently. So for instance, if you see this red cross with the blue backgrounds, each piece that is one color is a piece of glass cut that shape, and then the black lines are actually where the liquid metal was used to join the pieces of glass together. And then when they cool, they make a new piece of glass, very strong and sturdy, and very pretty. Now this cross here is a very traditional look. This set of 3 crosses right next to it is also stained glass, but you'll notice it's a very different look. This artist used curvy pieces of glass and put them together in more of a modern look, and that's great too. These photos here, the one with the dove and the cross, the tulips, and also these abstract designs at the top, those are all not glass. Those are paper, marker, and paint. And so we're going to do something like that today. But I love these different styles. The cross with the dove and the tulips are very traditional. But then we have these really fun abstract shapes up here, having nothing to do with Easter or Palm Sunday, but just having a fun time together as a stained glass, kind of a stained glass look. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause my computer. You will just see a change, and I'm going to invite my phone to come so you can see my desktop and we can do the lesson together. Okay, so I'm going to actually have to stop sharing first. Okay, now I have to come back to this, and now I will pause. Be right back. Okay, I think we're back. I hope that you can hear me for the rest of this video. Okay, so here we are. And what I think is from this is kind of my first time doing it this way, you guys, as far as recording it on Zoom. So I think that you cannot see my face. And I'm just going to go with that you can only see this, because I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. So, okay. So here's the flyer. Here on this flyer, if you have this, mine again is still not printing out very well, but I'm going to hold it up. And what you can see is the colors. Look how they go. Antonio Gaudi designed this for the colors to go kind of from these warm orange and yellow and red tones over to the cool tones like greens and blues, and then over here even some violets over here. And in real life, if you print out this photo and don't have my bad printer, the colors are so vibrant and beautiful. But take a look at these designs here. I'm going to try to get really close. You can see the designs here are just abstract. There's no actual picture of anything. Lines that are diagonal, horizontal, vertical. Some of them are curved, different shades of blue, but no picture, just color in different shapes. And here again are some of his buildings here. And this one has some pretty mosaics. Look at these interesting shapes. That's just so interesting for a building. Here's a question I have for you. What words would you use to describe Gaudi's work? Think about that. All right, we're going to move on to our project for today, which is making some stained glass art. Let me show you some samples. Here I did one a while back. I actually did these last year to look like stained glass. And I did one that looks like this. So I'm going to show you how to do this with what I've given you. Okay? So I'm going to move these out of the way. Here's one I'm working on, and I'll show you how to do this. So fun. First, what you're going to need today is you're going to need a piece of paper. And if you have received a packet of paper from me, then you have, oh dear, I had the paper. Where did I put it? It was right here. Here it is. Okay. So if you received a piece of paper from me, it was a big one like this. Here's what I did. Notice that this is about half the size. So what I'm going to do is take my paper and fold it in half like that. And I'm going to use 1/2 of this today. You can do a full one, but I would say for your first one, let's do a 1/2 a sheet. So I'm folding it in half both ways. And then I'm going to use a pair of scissors. And I'm going to cut along my fold. Just like that. I forgot to put scissors on the list. But if you need to, you can pause the video, run and get a pair of scissors, cut it, and then come right back. Okay, so I've got my 1/2 a sheet of paper. Also with the lesson today, I gave you a couple of handouts that I think your mom has probably printed out. There's this handout, and you can see again how these designs are just some lines and some circles. Very simple here. And we'll talk about these big shapes in a minute. These are inspiration pages. So if this inspires you or gives you an idea of something to do, go ahead and use it. You could even trace these if you want to. You could hold this up to a window and put your white paper on top of it, and with a pencil you could trace. And I'll show you something that I traced. So what I did, I also gave you this handout. This, a lot of times you'll see lilies at Easter. Maybe you've seen this symbol before. It's called a fleur-de-lis. And it is actually, I've looked it up historically, it's a representation of this lily. And it's got 3 petals, whereas this lily has 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the 3 petals here represent the 3 parts of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So that's kind of a fun, I guess, a fun tidbit to know. So what I did is I took my 1/2 sheet of paper and I put my original here up to the window. I laid my paper over it and I traced it. I traced the lines, and I've got this. So I've got that. Or you could do something like this. I traced this one over here. And then I wanted it to make it look like stained glass. So I drew a border around my edges freehand. It's not even very straight. It doesn't have to be perfect because stained glass isn't perfect. So I drew a square around the whole thing. Then I drew another square just inside and I let my lines overlap here in the corners, and then I drew another line here. This was just my design. You don't have to do it this way. You can do it however you like. And then I'm going to put in these lines to make it look like these are big chunks of glass. So I'm just going to do that. I just made some lines connecting things. That's one way, and I'll show you how to do this in a minute. But here's one I did. I drew a big circle, and something you could do to draw a circle, you could take a plate and turn it over and trace a circle on your paper. This one's too big for my paper. You could trace something like this. I have a jar. You could trace around the bottom of a jar, or a sour cream lid, or the top of a cup. And these I drew by hand. So I'm going to show you how to do this if you don't want to trace, okay? Because I've already done my tracing, but I'm going to do a freehand one, and I'm going to base it on this photo here, on this flyer. So here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put this up here where I can see it, and I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to do kind of like this one. I'm going to draw a circle, just like that, and I'm going to draw two of these. So I'm going to draw two down below. I'm going to put a dot where I want the top of each one to be, so I'll know they're about one there and one there. So I'm going to come down like this, straight down, like that. And I'm going to do another one here. There, that's about what I wanted. Now I might want my black lines to be here. That just helps me know what I'm going to do. Okay, so now here's the important part. Once you get your design lightly penciled, and you might want to do a little more. I'm going to do some freehand. I'm not going to do everything in pencil first, but I am going to draw some lines here just to give me a little bit of a guide so I know about what I'm doing. I'm going to do this, that, and that. My lines will be a little straighter when I use my marker, but it's okay if they're not perfect. So I'm just going to leave that like that. Now I'm going to get my black permanent marker. Okay, so if you have a Sharpie marker or one like this, you just need it to be permanent so that when it gets wet with water, it won't bleed. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I start putting my marker on my paper, I'm going to put something under my paper. So make sure you do the same. I have this old watercolor pad, and I'm just going to use the back of this. Put that right there. So I'm protecting underneath, because look what it looks like. That bleeds through, and if that gets on your table underneath, you won't be happy, and your mom probably won't either. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to take my marker. This one has a pointy tip here, but a big tip there. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start marking this in. Just like that. And then if you want straight lines, here's what I do for straight lines. If you start at the top and pull down towards you, sometimes for me, I get a straighter line than if I go up. If I pull down, that helps me. My lines might not be perfect, but here I'm just going to go from the inside out. Pull and pull there. You can make any design you want. You might want to look at that really colorful flyer that I had. I sent one to your mom, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do one, and I'm going to do three. I'm going to do three, like a three-petaled flower to represent the Trinity. Okay, I'm just getting my main shapes in here with the marker before I add more details. Okay, there's my main. Okay, that's how I started this one. Now you'll notice I have thin and some lines that are thick because I want to emphasize certain things. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go around and I'm going to use the broad side of this pen and get a thicker line. Just like that, like I did on my other one. And I might want to do the same on this one too. I'm not showing it all to you at this moment because this will take a little while and yours will take a little while too. So make sure you're taking your time and doing your best work. Okay. So I do want this to be thicker and I want my lines, these lines to be thicker too. You can turn your paper if you find a way where your lines are easy to draw. Just turn your paper as you draw. Sometimes we forget about that, but it does make things a lot easier. Okay, there's that. Here's how I go about putting in a design. You could design any way you like. You could use circles. I didn't use any circles. I think I'll use some circles in this one. I'm going to draw a line straight across here and make that thick. And I'm going to draw some circles. Notice how my marker's not perfect there? I'm just going to do that like that. I'm just adding in some lines here to break up as if these were pieces of real glass that were soldered together. That's the word we use. And I think I'll do up here, I'll do straight up like that to make that a little more traditional. And I'm going to make this one in a similar way to the one I just made. I'm going to make this also a little thicker like that. Do the same here. I'm going to put a circle in a different spot on this one. So I'm just adding in some lines. You could have bigger pieces, smaller, totally up to you. Okay, I'm going to call that good. You want to give some attention to your lines too. You want to make them nice and solid. Okay, that's good. Now, I'll show you the watercolor technique in a minute. But what you want to do first is I want to ink in the areas where I'm not going to put the stained glass. So for instance, I'm going to ink in this because I'm not going to have any glass in there. Same over here. But I've decided that on this one, I want to add some glass up here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this go like this. And I'm going to do right there. But I'm still going to have lots of black. I think I'm going to do like that. There we go. And I'm going to go about right here. And I'm going to do, how was I going to do this? I'm going to do this. Okay, so you'll see I'm kind of drawing out the space where I want my window to be. And now I'm going to just make it black in the areas where there's not going to be any glass showing through. And this is the part that takes a little while. Okay, you can see how I'm going in there and covering up all that. But I've added a window here, 2 windows at the top actually. And let's see here. Okay, so up here, I'm going to add some lines like this. Okay, and now I could decide if I want to do some more windows. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a circle window here and a circle window there. And I think that's all I want. So now I'm going to ink all of the rest of this in. Just like this. So this is the part that takes a little doing. Slow and steady wins the race. Don't try to rush it. Just take your time and do a good job. It helps if you have a thicker Sharpie like this, one that's got a lot of juice in it. If your Sharpie starts to dry out, see about switching Sharpies. One thing I wanted to mention is if you don't have a black Sharpie and you have a black Crayola marker, but you don't have a black permanent marker, what you would do then is you would do the colored part. You would do your pencil first, do your colored part, and then once all of your colored part dries, then you would go back and do all the black on top of it once the color is completely dry. So you can do it that way too. Okay. And I have to decide, what am I going to do here? I'm going to do, yeah. Okay. All right. So our next step, once you get your black inked in and you have your windows are white like this, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put my Sharpie aside. And now it's time for, I'm going to move my papers out of the way here. Now it's time for the markers, Crayola markers, and some water. But first, we're going to use the foil. So if you have a piece of foil, we're going to do something different. I want to show you this. This I colored in with the markers. Okay, I didn't use that color, but I just colored it in, being careful to color all of the white. And then I took a white paintbrush and went over it a little bit. It changes it a little bit, but not a lot. You could use colored pencils, you could use permanent markers, but what I think turns out really beautiful is this down here. Notice this is a little different than up here. I'll show you how to do this. So here's how we do this. We're going to take our good friend foil, and I'm going to make a paint palette with my markers like we did before, that tip I showed you. And I'm going to get my ink all ready right here. I'm going to take a minute and get all these, whatever colors I'm going to use. Also, I want you to think about the colors on the color wheel. And I have used here, you may have noticed I used analogous colors. These colors are all next to each other on the color wheel. Yellow, greens, teal, and then a blue, and then the purple. So these are the cool colors, except for the yellow, which is a warm color. But I've got the analogous colors going on. So think about your colors. Maybe you want to use all warm colors. Maybe you want to use the whole rainbow. Completely up to you. Okay, I'm going to add another purple here. I'm just going to use the same colors I was kind of already using to stay consistent with my look. So I'm not going to use any of the warm colors. But actually, I'll put the yellow on here in case I use a little bit of yellow. Okay, so my paint palette is ready. Here's what we're going to do. So here's this. My paint palette is ready. My water. Remember, with a wet brush, I'm going to go in. Let's see, I think I'll start with a little bit of the blue. I'm just going to paint on some color there. I've got my paper towel here in case I need to dab my brush. And I'm just going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to go over here to the teal and pick up a little teal. And I'm going to bring that over here. Maybe I'll get a little green and bring that over here. And maybe some of this light green and bring that over here at the end. See what I just did? I just kept adding colors. Now I can clean my brush, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick up some of this blue here, and I'm just going to dab that in. See how it's darker? Okay, and I'm going to also I'm going to add a little more green in here. This will dry fairly quickly. If you don't make it too watery, then you can go back and you can actually color over some areas. I'm going to do some more purples and blues on this one. Let's do a little bit of purple. And notice how I went over the lines. You don't have to stay in the lines. You can go over them if you want to. That's what I like to do. You can do it however you like. But I'm going to try some of this blue over here. I'm going to go back and put in some of this. Right back over there. So that's the fun thing you can do, is you can go back over and change it a little bit after it dries. For instance, I'm going to go back down here and color over these. I'm going to go in and I'm going to color this one right here and add a little bit of color. So because that's dry, I can change it a little bit. Maybe I'll put a little more teal in this one. There. So have fun with this, you guys. Let's try this. Put some of this in here. And remember to dab off your paintbrush when you need to. Okay, let's see. I think on my other one, I'm going to use that lighter green. Change my colors up a little bit. Darker green. And maybe a little teal. There you go. So you could make some stained glass for Easter and put that up around your house to make it feel a little bit more like church on Sunday morning when you're doing church at home. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to remember to tell you. Let's see, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to go back to this one. I'm going to go back to that one and this one. You might be wondering how I did this one. And this is just like this one. I started out in pencil. I drew the dove first. Let me show you what I did. Oops, I can't show you on that one. So all I did was I drew my dove, which is a simple shape like this. There's the basic bird shape, just like that. And then you see one wing like that, and another wing like that, and maybe a couple of extra tail feathers like that. That was it, just like that. And then I drew the cross. Now I'm just using a pencil, very light. You know what I say, draw light till you know it's right. This just gives me the basic shape, the basic idea of the cross. Okay, so now I have this cross shape. Now I know where I could put my Sharpie. Just like that. So I did that. And then I went in and just made some extra lines and put some marks in for stained glass. Some of them were small and others were large. You get to decide how you're going to do it. So you can see that's what I did here. Notice here, if you want to get really fancy, you could round some of your marker areas. I'll show you what I mean. For instance, oh, where's the one I just had? You guys, I have so much paper here, it's hard to keep track of everything. Okay, so if I had this one, I could take my marker and go in and let's see, right here. I can go in and just round these corners a little bit. Right there. You don't have to do this part, but if you want to, you can. And it just, I don't know, it adds something so that it looks a little more than just like a marker on a paper. So do you see how that changed the look of that on this section compared to this section? Just by rounding some of those little corners. I'll do one more here. I'll do this little section here. Just like that. Takes a little time, but it's definitely worth it. There's another one. Oops, I forgot this guy on this side. There. So you can see that adds another dimension. Either way, however you like to do it, I hope you enjoy this project. And if you do, I would love to see a photo of it. So if you finish it and you love it, have your mom take a picture and send it to me. I would love to see it, okay? I hope you have a wonderful Palm Sunday and a wonderful Easter. And I will see you back here on video on the Monday after Easter for another fun project. All right, take care, everybody. Have a wonderful spring break. Bye-bye.